scientists, archaeologists, historians, biblical scholars have been asking the question, was Noah's flood real? And of course, people of a religious bent, and certainly in the Abrahamic faiths, they believe it is. But we atheists tend to think of everything biblical as being mythical, which is not necessarily the case. And tonight we have someone who's going to present scientific evidence that a flood actually occurred. Our guest is Dr. Walter C. Pittman III. He is a professor in Columbia University's Department of Earth and Environmental Sciences. He's an award-winning marine geophysicist. Say that backwards 3 times. He asserts that there is enough geological evidence that scientists are able to say with certainty that Noah's flood took place in the Black Sea at around 5500 BCE. And he and his colleague William Ryan have written a book entitled Noah's Flood, which has been published in 9 different languages, including Japanese and Hebrew, and is available on Amazon. The research has revealed that there apparently it was a terrifying rapid rise in sea level, and to anyone living in Mesopotamia at the time, of course, that would have seemed like the end of the world. So it's a fascinating story, and I'm going to get out of the way and let the expert do the talking. So please welcome Dr. Walter C. Pittman.
Pottery, linear band ceramic. Okay, here's a very important point. This is a language tree. You can't see it. And the genetic, you call it genetic history of languages is very controversial, because how do you, there's no gene, all you know is words that you're speaking now. Or a language you may be certain is related to the words they are speaking. What linguists assume is that there's a rather fixed rate at which words evolve in any language. So as they see a word in your language for a chicken, and a word in a language which they think is related to yours, which may have taken that word chicken but twisted it around a bit, they look at their word, they look at the word you use, and they try to guess how much time it took for that evolution to take place. It's a guess. And then a biologist and a linguist, they got together and they used what geneticists use, what people who look at dinosaurs and so forth use, cladistics, which is a way of studying the family tree of animals and people. And so they applied cladistics to these Indo-European languages, and they came up with a very, amongst the other things, the people said, no, the European languages did not disperse to about 3,000 or 4,000 BC, and that is based on this study of the verbiage of the language. If you use the cladistics, you get a very different answer. That, okay, these are the various of the Indo-European languages. Down here are the various Greek languages. Armenian is related to Greek. This is the Tocharian. Tocharian was found who lived north of. These are all the Indian languages in here: Romani, Bengalis, and Punjabi, and so forth. So this is the branch tree of the Indo-European languages, of the Indian languages, and the Greek. And let me go back one, and we can see when they dispersed. So the Indian languages, the form of the languages separated from the Greek form of the languages about 6,900 years ago. And these ages are quite approximate. What this diagram is saying is no, the Indo-European languages did not disperse 3,000 years ago. They went through a long period of dispersal, starting at 8,700 years, but a major dispersal during this period of time, when the European branches of the Indo-European languages separated from the Indian and Anatolian versions of those languages, perhaps about 6,900 BC. The linguists are not happy about this at all. But too bad, you know? Okay, legends. How much time do I have, Ray? It's 8 o'clock, so I started when? About 10 after. So I'll be done in just a couple minutes. Legends. The Sumerian deluge legend appears to be an abbreviated creation story ending in a flood. Atrahasis, the story of creation. This is wonderful. These stories are great. There's no angry God in these kind of legends. God is very whimsical, you know. But you kids are making too much noise. I'm going to flood you after hell. I'm tired of you. The story of creation, the revolt of the lesser gods, and creation of humankind to do all the work. The people were making too much noise, so they were punished with a plague. Didn't work. A drought. That didn't work at all. And finally the flood. Well, that got rid of most of them. And how many times, and particularly any of you who live in, well, New York and or the suburbs, have wanted to send a flood to the neighbor's house? You know, particularly if the neighbor has kids who ride motorcycles and like to sit around at 2 o'clock in the morning, doing that kind of stuff. The Gilgamesh epic Gilgamesh goes to see Utnapishtim, who tells him the story of the flood. When were they committed to writing? The biblical flood story, probably about 800 BC. Gilgamesh around the early 2nd millennium, that would be between 2000 and 1000 BC. The Sumerian deluge legend, perhaps the earliest, maybe just after about 3000, 2500 to 3000 BC. All these stories are all the same. There's a warning. Somebody builds a boat, loads animals on the boat with friends and neighbors, and the flood comes. None of them is there a mention of rain or a storm, a very violent storm.
So this flood story was written almost 5,000 years after this catastrophic flood in the Black Sea.
Yeah. How can that happen? I'll tell you how it happens. Do you have any children? No? How do I know? Come on.
No.
Anybody with children, you've probably read Green Eggs and Ham or some other story 1,000 times. 1,000 times. So your kid can't read. Your kid just sits and goes and you read the story. So you decide, I'm going to skip a page. Mommy! Try to skip a paragraph, try to skip a sentence, try to skip a word. No. You can't get away with it. Now, mind you, they can't read. They've just memorized this story, every word and syllable. So I think that's probably the way it happened.
So the story was passed down.
That's right, yeah, and probably more successful in Mesopotamia than anywhere else because there was a continuity of civilization without an awful lot of war. You know, Europe just went through horrible chaos for years, and so probably a lot of legend memory was destroyed in that process. But it's a good question, and it's every time I say, "Have you ever read Green Eggs and Ham?" to your children, you know, at least half the audience laughs. Yeah, we sure have. Yeah.
The ancient world.
I didn't get to see it. Is it still up? I know what you're talking about.
I was there last night. I think it's finished, but it was amazing because it was about this whole venture culture, and in particular David Anthony, who's now the leading expert on this whole theory of the dissemination. Anybody who's interested at all in this needs to look at David Anthony's newest book, The Wheel, the Horse, and Language, and where Indo-European comes from. I've just started reading myself, but I know it. And I was wondering, so do you have any idea of how this is going to influence?
No, I have no idea.
Is there any known connection between historically between the Gilgamesh and the more biblical one? Do the stories are they known to have
No, I mean nobody
come from the same area?
The same. I mean, the flood is literally the same story.
Right.
It's just the Gilgamesh is probably older in the sense of having been written down.
Did the people cross at any time?
Yeah, the Jewish people were in Babylon for quite a while, and they may have picked up the story there.
Jay and then Rand.
Okay, just a quick question for general orientation on my part and perhaps others as well. Now, you're saying that the sudden flooding of the Black Sea, sudden in geographic terms anyway, of the Black Sea resulted essentially from the Mediterranean rising as a result of the melting of the glaciers to a point where the fairly narrow connection between the Mediterranean and the Black Sea just sort of suddenly burst open. Is that essentially what happened?
Well, the water would have trickled in at first, but keep in mind it's basically an infinite reservoir trying to flood a small basin. So as the water floods in, you aren't going to reduce the level of the Mediterranean significantly. As the water cuts a trough through the Bosporus, that the water in the Bosporus gets deeper. The velocity of the water is proportional to the square root of the depth. As the water gets deeper, more of it flows. It's capable of eroding faster. As it erodes faster, it gets even deeper. So that within probably 30 days, it probably didn't take any more than that for it to go from a trickle up to 50 cubic kilometers a day. And then it flooded until it began to rise high enough that it was able to abate the flood, but that would have taken a while. Yeah.
Would there be any effect in the Mediterranean?
Any what?
Any effects in the Mediterranean?
None.
Brad?
Yes. In answer to this gentleman's concern right here, this question, Gilgamesh was supposed to occur between 800 to 1,200 years before Noah's flood, or before. It's exactly the same thing. What was described, as you mentioned, what was in Noah's flood was mentioned in Gilgamesh.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Exactly the same, like 800 to
same story.
So that's
and another thing, we have, they showed pictures about a year ago was, where they sent a submarine down and they looked at the bottom of where the flood occurred, and that was supposed to be found porous. That's the wine, those big wine. With that.
I think that was out in the Mediterranean.
Was that the Mediterranean?
Maybe
That was the Mediterranean?
I think so, yeah.
Someone who hasn't asked a question yet. Okay, so wait for
Yes. Is the Black Sea now salt water or fresh water?
Is it what?
Salt or fresh?
Well, it's both. It has salt water on the bottom and fresh water on the top. It's getting a constant flow of salt water coming in from the Mediterranean, and then a constant flow outward on the surface of fresh water from the rivers that are, and it's now stable as far as its height goes.
Fresh water is actually less dense than salt water.
That's right. So it sits on ground. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Okay. Well, thank you.
Anglican churches established.
Okay. Here's some commentary by various. This is the guy from the LA Times who does non sequitur. The half-finished ark, Noah, the squat little guy, and the carpenter. You have to keep in mind that the completion date was only an estimate, not an absolute, but don't worry, we'll get it done. Of course, the damn rain is going to delay it some more. These are actually Mesolithic rock drawings from southeast Caspian Sea coast. Caspian is right next to the Black Sea, as you know. And then, let's see. Okay, there's Noah loading up the ark. Now listen up. We're going to do this alphabetically. Okay, that's it.
We're going to have some questions from the audience, but I just wonder, do you have any idea, you covered it actually, when the flood did occur,
Yeah.
can you give us an idea in real time how long that took?
Probably, as I said, people living in the Danube Delta would have to walk around 2 kilometers a day every day. And just because the rising of the water slowed down, they would not have stopped. I mean, they're going to get out of there.
Yeah.
They're going to get out of there. So, but something I did mention, the noise must have been terrifying, absolutely terrifying, because that level of energy you can feel from hundreds of miles away. Wouldn't you think so, Tim? Many miles away. You could feel it here, the ground would be shaking, it would be just most likely black clouds coming out from just the tumult of the water. People would get out to higher ground as soon as they could.
So anyone would have thought it was the end of the world.
Oh, sure, absolutely, yeah. Yes?
Just a question. With a flood of that scale, that speed, that energy, would you have expected to find a ring of debris at the high point of the flood as boulders, trees, whatever, get pushed along and subsequently be able to see an unusual amount of fluvial deposits or larger debris?
Well, maybe deep down underwater, but the flood actually slowed down. And so, I mean, eventually, after probably many months, it would be just creeping slowly inland, almost like a perpetual tide, a tide that's always going in one direction. And then, of course, on top of that, you have the eventual melting of enough ice to raise sea level another 15 meters. So it would have been, people have looked for this stuff, but they haven't found it.
Yeah, there was it's interesting that you were mentioning the four main when you were mentioning the four main origins of flood myth.
Yeah.
I've read that actually, in addition to those that the Egyptians had their flood myth, which apparently was probably derivative of one of those. I'm not sure. I know that the creation myth itself had maybe it's 20 different creation myths, and they were condensed and recondensed and recondensed. But I noticed that apparently, if you go from the Babylonians to the Persians to the Egyptians, there's somewhere in all of them there's some kind of flood myth. It's just that the flood occurs in different order.
Sure.
I think I'm not sure which one of those, but in one of the creation myths, it's actually the flood that causes creation.
Yeah.
And I don't remember which one it was, but it's very interesting. That's why I'm really happy to have this discussion.
Well, look, since people tend to live down by the water, almost everybody has been flooded out at one time or another. And they aren't all the same flood by any means.
Yeah, you talked about the sudden appearance in Europe of
linear band corona.
well, at least of products of material culture that weren't there. Are there any similarities to what existed in Anatolia?
Well, we don't really know. I mean, that's one thing we're trying to
I mean,
find
there
out.
was similar rock drawings or similar pottery forms or similar architecture.
There is one very strange and weird similarity, and that is from Southeast Europe. There's this is from a book by Jim Budis, who did a lot of work as an archaeologist there. There are these clay models of women, and they have stripes on their buttocks, back, and thighs. They think they were tattoos, and they're very distinctive. And I was looking at some website from Turkey. Okay, these statuettes come from Southeast Europe, and they're immediately subsequent to the time of the flood. And I was looking in Turkey, and I happened to run across a group of people who were interested in the Amazons. Did the Amazons really exist? And they had a bunch of statuettes from an island right off the South Turkish coast, right off Turkey. Exactly the same thing. I was amazed. The exact same shape of these women with these, they were incised ornamental paint. I don't know. I couldn't believe it, you know. And but, you know, doing archaeology in Turkey is pretty tough. I mean, look, in Southeast Europe, these people would have come up out of the Black Sea. There's the Danube River Valley. They wander up the Danube River Valley. It was already pretty well populated, and they settle down. And they leave their artifacts behind. Like Turkey, you know, that north coast of Turkey is not a place you wanted to live. They would have gotten out of there. So their remains would be pretty far to the south and very hard to analyze, I would think.
I have never been to the site in Turkey that's claimed to be the Ark, but I've talked to people who've been there, one of whom said that actually that there's a specific, I guess there's an indentation in the basalt.
Yeah.
But apparently there are other similar indentations to it as well.
Yeah.
That, and the Turkish government isn't saying anything. So they're not taking a stand on it because they're getting tourist bucks.
It's a broken anticline, I think, isn't it? You can see that picture?
No, I don't.
Yeah, I've never been there, so I
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah.
Well, I got two things. One, I recently heard that some people claim to have discovered Noah's Ark.
That what?
That
Yeah, just something the other day, yeah.
discovered Noah's Ark in the last week, 2 weeks. That's when I heard.
Somebody discovered it?
Yeah, that's when I heard about it.
At least
No,
not
yes, in Manhattan. It was on 186.
Well,
Right.
actually,
But the other question that I have though is, you're saying that the water was forced through like this narrow gap?
Pardon me?
You had like a diagram of the water shooting through like a narrow gap. Do you know how wide that gap was?
Well, I know how wide it is now.
Or how wide it is now?
It's 800 meters.
800
I mean,
meters.
when we calculated that velocity of 50 cubic kilometers a day is we use flume engineering diagrams to do that, so it's pretty accurate.
Okay.
I'd like to say one thing that I haven't had a chance to read the article about the latest discovery of the Ark or claim of it, but in all seriousness, that whole bit at the beginning about Ark Watch, it was because I was reading an article on the internet, and some guy had said that he had found.
This is something that
I forgot the guy's name. This one of the first people that claimed they had scientific evidence of the Ark and had pieces of gopher wood that was supposedly made the Ark.
Yeah.
And the guy was a fraud. He basically sent some of the pieces of petrified wood off to this company in Tennessee who analyzed it, and basically they found certain trace elements in it, but he was saying that they were verifying his claim that it was pieces of the gopher wood. I don't think anyone knows what gopher wood really is. No one's ever actually found gopher wood. But this first guy was like totally distorting it. The second article that I read was this guy who's a pilot or something, and it had something to do with an astronaut too.
Reader's Digest has been writing those articles and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he said.
Every Reader's Digest had an article when they found the Ark.
And
Or if they
almost
didn't
always-
find the Ark, they found the True Cross, or they found some other thing, and you know, there was always, every issue of Reader's Digest.
Well, this time they really found it.
This time, so far, everything has either been unprovable or outright fraud. Sorry.
I was just wondering, in addition to the flooding, which apparently came from the Bosphorus,
Yeah.
then the Black Sea overflowed, is that correct?
Well, no, the world ocean comes into the Black Sea and floods it out.
So then it's overflowing over the entire land, right?
Yeah, right,
Okay,
exactly.
is it pouring, raining?
No,
Time?
doesn't have to rain. Doesn't have to rain, there's no rain at all.
Oh,
Yeah. Gopher wood, it comes from the following. You know, in ancient times in Mesopotamia, the kid Ishmael comes in to see his mom. He says, "Mom, I'm bored." She says, "Go for some wood."
That was so bad, I wish I had said it.
Yes, a couple things. When I was a kid, about 9, 10 years old,
Yeah.
I went to Sunday school, and asked them how Noah got fish on the ark. Since you can't have saltwater fish in freshwater, and freshwater fish can't be in saltwater.
Yeah.
You know, how do you preserve the fish?
Yeah.
And they threw me out.
You were lucky.
How'd they clean up the dinosaur crap?
They told me they had eggs. But, another thing that they in Sumeria,
Yeah.
they have a story of the flood coming down the Tigris and Euphrates.
That's right. Yeah.
And it floods the entire area, and one man and his family were preparing a boat, and they had animals and they had supplies on the boat, and they were carried out in the Persian Sea by this flood waters, and apparently they settled somewhere around Qatar.
Dilmun.
Qatar.
Dilmun.
Yeah.
I don't remember the name, but
That was their ancient name, Dilmun, which may have been Qatar.
And
it was the Sumerian paradise.
Yeah.
That is where I thought this had started something from that rendition of a flood taking place in the Tigris Euphrates.
Yeah.
Now, would this have flowed on from the Black Sea
No.
through the Tigris?
No.